Happy Sunday morning, everybody. Welcome to the top of Saddle Mountains in central Washington. Let's look around up here, talk about the old Columbia River, talk about the old Snake River. What? That's right. Let's do it. It's brisk, but beautiful. If we peek over on this side, we can look down in the Columbia River. Columbia River coming from Canada, flowing south. You're looking north. Ellensburg's about 30 minutes that way. If I zoom for you, we can see Wanapum Dam, which creates Lake Wanapum behind it. Vantage area, the whole deal. Looking into the Quincy Basin and having Ice Age floodwater dropping into the Columbia once upon a time during the Ice Age. Yeah, this is drivable. Little Whitey can handle this road, so I think your passenger car can handle this road. It's a little rough in places, but you can do it. And then on this delightful morning, we can also kind of swing ourselves to the south and get out of the wind, which we are out of currently, and watch as the Columbia River continues to head south and work its way Priest Rapids area and then eventually to Pasco Basin. So let's just walk this and talk a little bit. There's multiple reasons to be up here. I think many come up to use their ATVs or their dirt bikes, or to drink some beer on a warm summer night, perhaps. This episode of Nick from the Field brought to you by Coors Light. But I'm not up here to hunt for petrified wood. I'm not up here to deal with much, except think about these river paths. And you're like, what's there to think about? There's the Columbia River. Hasn't it always been there? Well, no, and I have done programs over the years on evidence that the Columbia River has shifted its location if we go back far enough in time. But what I really want to talk to you about this morning is a new paper by Lydia Steich, published last year, 2021. And she has some exciting new results to say that if we go back far enough in time, we have the Snake River here in central Washington. The Snake River. For more than 1 million years, the Snake River left a bunch of sand, primarily on the north side of Saddle Mountains here. So that's what's on my mind on this beautiful morning. Let me just slow down for you and give you a sense to just kind of soak this in. I keep coming out here to the desert because the flowers are out and it's going to get harsh here soon. So, you know, once the weather turns and it gets a lot hotter out here, I'm going to be working my way up into the Cascades, I think. But for now, it makes sense to be out here in this age. I did a lecture, I don't know what it was, more than 5 years ago from downtown Ellensburg called Ancient Rivers of the Pacific Northwest. Have you seen the lecture? I'll put a link to it in the description below, in addition to the location of the white car here, in case you want to drive up here and see this for yourself. But that lecture has been very popular. It continues to be watched. I mean, it just kind of has a momentum of its own. And I think much of the allure for that lecture is the concept that you can find these river cobbles out in the desert where the river isn't there anymore. Like the river used to be there, but it isn't there anymore. And that's true for up here high on top of Saddle Mountains. There are all these river rocks, many of them from the Columbia, which proves that the Columbia used to cross this area instead of behind us And you're like, how's that possible? How can you get a river to go up and over the ridge? Well, that means the ridge hasn't always been there. That the ridge has lifted since the time of the Columbia River flowing across that region. Okay, well, that's one concept, and that's not that big a deal, I don't think, because, you know, there's the Columbia. Come on, it moved the Columbia used to flow, a few miles to the east. Big whoop. And I think I'm kind of with you there. Big whoop. But this new paper by Lydia and a team, and some of the team, I think I had a hand in connecting her with Paul Link, for instance, down at Idaho State University, who's been doing some detrital zircon work. It's a game of sand as opposed to cobbles. Oh yeah, we got some nice phlox here. Let's enjoy some of this phlox. So I was deeply into this old river story business back in 2018. In particular, the Hells Canyon story. I think I got an email from Jerry Smith, who's a retired fish fossils expert at the University of Michigan. And Jerry said, I enjoyed that lecture that you did on the ancient rivers, and you were using mostly the cobbles, but I think you could have also used the fish fossils that I have that tell a story of moving river channels. It's like, okay, that sounds good. So I pursued that, and I pursued a few other things, and before I knew it, I was deeply into that world, and I was emailing regularly with Bruce Bjornstad, who knows the Ringgold Formation, and Basil Tikoff, before I got to know him well, who'd been working on the Hells Canyon area. Steve Rydell, who worked with the river cobbles. So the point is, I was just kind of like stumbling along and reading old papers and new papers and putting some concepts together and actually sketching out some maps just for myself using my little colored pencils. And Grandpa Carl down at Granger had some property and some river cobbles there, and so before I knew it, I invited Lydia up to Ellensburg to give a public talk, and connected her to Grandpa Carl, and I met her down there, and I thought that Lydia would be interested in just kind of sampling some of the river cobbles, and much to my surprise, she didn't head to the river cobbles at all. She headed to the sand. She started scooping up the sand and putting it in little Ziploc bags. I think at one point I said, Lydia, I'm surprised. Like, why are you taking the sand? She said, well, I'm studying these old river pathways based on detrital zircons in the sand, as opposed to the river cobbles themselves. And I can do some statistics, I can do some analysis of this sand, and I can figure out a more complete picture of where that sand is coming from. All right, well, I found a good sitting rock, and let me get Lydia's paper out of my pack. Show it to you. In my world, this is a good day. You sit down with a cup of coffee at breakfast table, you get this paper out, you read it a little bit, you jump in the car, and out you go. So, here's our paper. I will link to this paper if I can find a link for it down below. Major reorganization of the Snake River, modulated by passage of the Yellowstone hotspot. And the cast of characters are numerous. And I think I want to go right to the key map here. So over the last century, the path of the Snake River has been postulated to have gone all sorts of different directions. Generally, the thought is, how long has the Snake River been going through Hell's Canyon? This bird's interested in geology. Let's let him join us here. So the hook, and this is a lecture I did a few years ago, is Hell's Canyon. And the question is, how many millions of years did it take to carve Hell's Canyon? Because the Snake River in southern Idaho is coming through Hell's Canyon. And why is Hell's Canyon deeper than the Grand Canyon, which is a real thing, by the way? And so the thought is, well, you know, we had Lake Idaho here in blue, that's in southern Idaho. And we had Lake Ringgold, which is the blue thing up here in central Washington. And by the way, we are at P2 right now. P2. So the general idea is that we had these two lakes that were disconnected, or not connected in other words, and therefore we did not have Hell's Canyon. We did not have the Snake River carving Hell's Canyon between those two lakes until about 3 million years ago. And Jerry Smith at the University of Michigan was the guy to tip me off that his work showed that there are fish fossils in Lake Idaho and fish fossils in Lake Ringgold that are not the same fossils until about 3 million years ago. And then suddenly there's some sort of breaching and the Snake River starts draining Lake Idaho, and that water goes through this earliest days of Hell's Canyon, and before you know it, you start carving quickly Hell's Canyon, and you connect these drainages, and therefore there are fish fossils that suddenly younger than 3 million years ago are common between these two basins. All right, well, Lydia says this different approach where she says, I think I have river sands at P1 and P3 and P2 that tell us that the Snake River somehow got to P1 and P3 long before you start carving Hell's Canyon. Like, well, that's impossible. Lydia, are you sure you have sand in central Washington that was deposited by the Snake River way older than 3 million years ago? And she says, yes, I do. From this spot right here. From Lydia's paper, here's some cartoon maps. So this is the upshot of her work. I'll try to hold the paper steady for you. So she is proposing that red line was the path of the Snake River before 6.5 million years ago. So CB is the central Washington area, that's the Columbia Basin. The Snake River Plain, there's a western Snake River Plain and an eastern Snake River Plain, that's southern Idaho. And I did my master's thesis in the eastern Snake River Plain. And so she's got the Snake River back at that time heading north from the Snake River Plain into Montana and then working its way westward and heading to here. And you're like, well, that sounds like fantasy land. Well, maybe it does feel like fantasy land, but if you start looking at her data, she wouldn't write this out unless she had some compelling data to tell this story. She's got river sand that is characterized by what was upriver of the Snake. So then if we go younger than 6.5 to this next panel, we still have the Snake heading up through Montana and shortcutting through here. Notice that Hell's Canyon is not here. HC is Hell's Canyon. There is no Hell's Canyon yet. There's still no Hell's Canyon by 3.3 million years ago. But notice that she now has the Snake no longer heading up through Montana and shortcutting to Washington. And then here's the more modern version. In the last 3.3 million years, Hell's Canyon has been cut, and the Snake River, which starts in Yellowstone National Park, makes it all the way. So I'm just starting to try to think about how to communicate the details of this paper effectively. I mean, like, 2 hours ago I'm sitting there with my scrambled eggs and starting to think about this. But I like sharing things as the ideas move along. So let's think about this. How can you prove that a river used to flow in an area that it no longer does? The vehicle that I used a decade ago was river cobbles themselves. And that's the most pleasing, I think. I mean, we all know what river cobbles look like. We can pull them right out of the floor or the bottom of a clear river channel, and we're fine. We're good. But here, it's different. Lydia's not using the cobble, she's using sand. And you're like, oh, well, that's not very satisfying. I mean, sand can be from a sand dune, sand can be from a beach, sand can be blown in, I suppose. I don't know. Like, are you really sure that that sand was brought by a river? And are you really sure that that sand was brought by a particular river? It's a challenge to be convincing about that from my point of view. And I don't know about the statistical method she was using. I don't even really know about how you tease out zircons and do the detrital zircon story, really. I have a basic grasp of it. So if you're losing it, the main thing I'm trying to say is that instead of the Snake River being in southern Idaho for many millions of years, and then suddenly the Snake River is getting up here into Washington because of the carving of Hell's Canyon. What I'm now starting to realize is that there's a much older, much more interesting history to the pathway of the Snake River that didn't go through Hell's Canyon at all, and instead it came right through Montana to shortcut its way up here to central Washington. Muffler boy. Coincident with much of the tenure of Lake Idaho in the western Snake River Plain is the 9.5 to 3.4 million-year-old Ringgold Formation, which overlies the German chocolate cake. Detrital zircon provenance analysis allows potential source terrains to be identified by investigating the age and relative abundance of uranium-lead zircon ages. In this study, we present new uranium-lead zircon age analysis of 8 modern river systems to characterize the detrital zircon populations of the known source areas. We also collected 28 new samples from fluvial sandstones throughout the Pacific Northwest to characterize the source of ancestral river systems, and used existing data sets collected in Idaho, Montana. Paul Link and former students at Idaho State University. These data sets include samples from 25 modern rivers and 13 samples from ancestral fluvial strata. Yeah, so I connected Lydia with Paul, I think. Maybe they knew each other ahead of time, not sure, but I think I did. And Paul's like, by email with me. This is 4 years ago. It's like, she's got what? She's got Eastern Snake River Plains sand up there at Saddle Mountains? I don't see how that's possible. She's sure it's sand from us, right? So to make this work, Lydia also needed to study modern river sand. So she's going to the rivers as they exist today, and collected 33 modern river sediment samples. Each fluvial system contains unique age populations that reflect the exposed geology of the contributing landscape upstream at the time of deposition. Yeah, so that's the idea, that you go to a modern river, preferably not dammed, but I guess even if it's dammed, like the Columbia here, and you look at the Columbia River sand today and you say, okay, well, this sand, a majority of the sand came down the river, and the sand in a river today is coming from bedrock that's exposed upstream, right? Way up in the smallest tributaries, way up in the high country. And so Lydia and others have worked with this detrital sand, as it's known, detrital zircon sand, and said, the sand in this river today is telling us about what the bedrock is upstream, and therefore we can come up with this fingerprint, this zircon sand fingerprint for a modern river. And so if we do this often enough, we can say, this sand is modern Columbia, this sand is modern Snake, this sand is modern Clearwater, this sand is modern Salmon River. But then you also go back in time and you say, I have sand here. What do I do with it? It came in by a river. Which river brought it? And she's saying she has data to know how to identify ancestral Snake River sand. So these kinds of plots I'm still learning how to read. But she has, these are what detrital zircon plots look like. And then she's got her modern sand plots also. Notice the ages go back billions of years. Well, to finish this little video, how about we just go up and over the top of this little thing. Pick up a little bit of breeze, but give you a sense of the view from up here in case you want to come up on your own. Thank you. I love you. And goodbye. From Saddle Mountains, Central Washington, USA. Happy Mother's Day.